The Denver airport pulsed with early morning rhythm. Screens blinked with boarding updates, and the scent of burnt espresso mingled with luggage wheels scraping tile. Business travelers typed away, couples whispered travel plans, and parents wrestled with strollers. Amid them all, Emily Carter moved quietly toward gate 26, boarding pass gripped in one hand, weathered backpack slung across her shoulder. She wore a navy hoodie and beige jeans, unremarkable, invisible, just another traveler, just another seat number. She stepped onto flight 982 to Seattle without ceremony. Window seat, row 17A, clicked her belt, closed her eyes as the engines purred awake. Outside, the tarmac gleamed under a rising sun. The world didn't know her, and she liked it that way. But she had a secret history stitched beneath her calm exterior, one that had been dormant for years. Once upon a time, Emily Carter had trained to live in the sky. She had been an Air Force cadet logging hundreds of simulator hours, commanding cockpits with split-second precision, performing emergency maneuvers like breathing. But something had shifted. Burnout, bureaucracy, disillusionment. She walked away from flying and landed in software development, a quieter world, a predictable one. It had been 6 years since her hands last gripped a yoke. This flight, just routine, just Seattle, just being a passenger. As the plane climbed into blue, she leaned into her seat and let the vibrations lull her. No decisions, no pressure. She welcomed the anonymity. She didn't want the sky anymore, or so she thought. 2 hours into the flight, a mild jolt passed through the fuselage, enough to rattle plastic cups and draw glances upward. Emily opened her eyes. Normal turbulence probably. A second jolt came. Sharper, prolonged. The cabin hushed. Overhead bins popped. A child cried. One oxygen mask dropped prematurely, swinging like a silent metronome. Emily sat up straight. She didn't panic. She listened. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm on the surface, but she caught it. That edge, that crack. We're experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Something was wrong, not weather, not ordinary. Her fingers tensed on the armrest. Her mind shifted without permission into assessment mode. She felt it in her chest. That vibration beneath the deck, the inconsistent pitch of the engine whine. She scanned the flight attendants. We're trying to smile, but their eyes darted toward the cockpit. One gripped the intercom too tightly. Another whispered into a handset, knuckles white. Then a bang. The plane lurched violently, banking hard left, then snapping right. Cries erupted. More oxygen masks dropped. The lights dimmed. Emily didn't scream. She calculated. This wasn't turbulence. Something deeper, mechanical, structural, the kind of thing you can't see, but trained eyes feel. She looked down the aisle. The cockpit door remained sealed. A flight attendant stumbled past. Emily reached out, steadying her. What's going on? The attendant hesitated, eyes wide. Level 3, malfunction. 1, engines failed. They're trying to stabilize the systems. Emily exhaled slowly. Not just failure critical. I'm Air Force trained, she said, voice low, steady. Certified pilot. If they need help, I can offer it. The attendant blinked, processing, then nodded once and disappeared toward the front. Emily sat back in her seat, heartbeat pounding. Could she really step back into a cockpit after all this time? After walking away, 1 minute passed, then 2, the attendant returned. Co-pilots, unconscious, captains requesting you now. Emily stood. In that moment between crying babies and terrified prayers, her feet felt anchored, like never before. She wasn't a passenger anymore. She was being summoned by the sky. The cockpit door opened with a mechanical hiss. Emily stepped inside. The smell hit first burnt wires, sweat, the faint metallic tinge of electrical distress. The overhead panel flickered erratically, red and amber warnings flashing like a Christmas tree in panic mode. Rain pelted the windshield beyond the nose of the plane, streaking sideways under heavy winds. It felt like the belly of a failing beast. Captain Doyle turned, gray streaks at his temples, soaked in effort. You're the passenger? He asked, disbelief cutting through his rasp. Emily Carter, former Air Force cadet, certified CFI. He motioned toward the right seat. Co-pilot's down, breathing, but barely. We've lost our left engine, right one's overheating. Autopilot's unresponsive, navigation's glitching. I can't hold this alone. Emily's pulse steadied, her body remembered. She checked the unconscious co-pilot's vitals, pulse weak, shallow breathing. Oxygen mask was secure, but he was out cold. Then, without hesitation, she slipped into his seat and pulled the harness over her chest. Okay, she said calmly, sliding the headset on. Let's level this thing out. The control yoke groaned under her grip. She shifted manually, adjusting pitch and toggling emergency power systems. The plane shuddered but responded just enough to stabilize their descent. The horizon indicator blinked, then caught steady. Captain Doyle let out a breath. You still remember your stuff? Most of it, she replied, her voice cool, calculating. Let's keep this bird in the air long enough to figure out a place to land. Below them stretched jagged mountains, thick pine forests, snow in crevices. Seattle was 28 minutes away and reachable with a dying engine. Emily scanned the backup display. Too far, not an option. Give me maps, she said. Doyle handed her a battered tablet. She thumbed through offline terrain data, searching for miracle options. Then she saw it. Mackenzie Ridge, decommissioned military airstrip, Cold War era. It's not on modern routes, but it's inside glide range. Doyle blinked. That's not maintained. It's barely a road. It's cracked concrete, 2,600 feet long, enough if we feather it in. Better than the side of a mountain. He hesitated. You sure no, but we're out of sky. Together, they adjusted course manually. Emily issued an emergency ping through a backup channel brief, enough to trigger responder systems nearby. Somewhere out there, someone was lighting the way. In the cabin, the chaos had dulled to silence. Passengers sat frozen, clinging to armrests, mouths whispering silent prayers. Flight attendants spoke softly. One offered vague words. There's support in the cockpit. No one knew the truth that the support was a woman from seat 17A. Back up front, Emily reviewed the descent rate. To steep or try flaps, she said. Negative. Hydraulic systems are shot. Manual then. She trimmed the angle of attack by hand, shifting stabilizers for a shallower descent. The yoke vibrated dangerously. Warning stall. She corrected. They were flying low, now treetop low. Mountains loomed like sleeping giants. Emily's focus narrowed. One problem at a time. Ahead, through the rain-streaked windshield, a faint glow appeared. Flashlights, headlights, a thin line of makeshift landing lights blinking in the wilderness. Doyle glanced at her. You want to bring her in? Emily looked straight ahead. You're not in shape to. I've got it. He didn't argue. Just slowly lifted his hands off the controls, relinquishing command of 170 tons of steel to the woman who had been sipping juice in coach 2 hours earlier. Emily. Carter adjusted the yoke with a surgeon's precision. Asterisk. The wind howled across the nose of the aircraft, shaking it like a loose hinge in a storm. Rain smeared the cockpit glass. Altitude dropped fast. Emily kept her hands firm on the controls, eyes focused, brain locked into calculation. Pitch angle, glide ratio, throttle, everything lived in her fingertips. She glanced at the gear indicator. Blank. The hydraulics were too damaged to verify deployment. Landing gears unconfirmed. She muttered. Captain Doyle leaned over and toggled a backup inspection feed. A flickering black and white camera view appeared. One wheel visible, the others shadows. Emily exhaled. We'll land dirty. Hope gravity did the job. The makeshift airstrip at Mackenzie Ridge emerged from the fog like a ghost, narrow, cracked, hemmed in by towering evergreens. Flares lit both edges. A row of fire trucks and emergency crews waited in the distance, their lights blinking like distant beacons of hope. Civilians watched from behind barricades, unsure if they were about to witness survival or disaster. We're coming in hot, Doyle warned. No choice, she replied. No space to loop. One shot, straight in. The stall alarm blared. Emily silenced it. Warnings weren't useful now. Instinct was. She flared the wings gently, adjusted rudder trim. The aircraft began its final approach, descending like a wounded bird, fast, heavy, and barely holding together. Throttle, she asked. Go on, we're gliding. She nodded. Hold your breath. The wind tore past the fuselage. Below, the trees thinned. The broken concrete of Mackenzie Ridge raced upward, slick from rain. Barely long enough to catch a jet's fall. Emily adjusted trim, raised the nose slightly, then took a final breath, and touched down. The front wheels slammed first hard. Sparks exploded beneath the nose gear. The rear tires screamed as they made contact. Rubber tore. The aircraft bounced, once, then again, then steadied. Emily slammed a manual brake lever. The cabin bucked. Oxygen masks swung. Passengers screamed as their bodies jolted forward. The plane skidded dash, until finally, violently, it stopped. 40 feet from the tree line. Silence. Utter silence. In the cockpit, Emily's hand still gripped the yoke. Her knuckles white, breath shallow, heart hammering inside her chest, that refused to believe what just happened. Then, from the cabin, a child's voice whispered, trembling and stunned. Did we just land? Then the sound rose: shaky laughter, muffled sobs, spontaneous applause. Flight attendants cried openly. One dropped to the floor in sheer relief. A woman embraced a stranger beside her. Somewhere near row 6, a man prayed aloud. Emily remained still. The passenger who became a pilot sat frozen in the stormlit cockpit. Captain Doyle turned toward her, pale and damp with sweat. For a moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, voice barely above a breath, he murmured, "You didn't just land the plane. You saved a world." She didn't respond. Couldn't yet. The outside world surged into motion, fire crews racing toward them, paramedics with stretchers, lights blinking through mist and rain. The plane was surrounded, but inside that cockpit, Emily Carter wasn't ready to move. Not yet. Emily Carter sat in the cockpit's quiet chaos. The storm outside had begun to settle, but inside, the aftermath still rang in her bones. The engines were dead. The sky had gone gray. The cabin was flooded with soft red emergency lights that cast long shadows across the broken dashboard. Her hands hadn't moved from the yoke. Her breath was shallow, but they were on the ground. "We're alive." Captain Doyle finally shifted, breaking the silence. "That was the most impossible landing I've seen in 3 decades, he said, quietly. "And you did it." Emily turned to him, blinking as if surfacing from underwater. Then slowly, reluctantly, she released her grip. Her fingers ached from how tightly she'd held the controls. "We need to get the passengers off this plane." He nodded. "Emergency exits. Let's move." Outside, rescue crews sprayed foam over the left engine. Paramedics moved in with stretchers, unsure of what awaited inside. But what they found was not fire or wreckage but stunned, wide-eyed survivors. The doors opened. The inflatable evacuation slides hissed outward. Flight attendants, still shaking, began guiding passengers down. Some crawled, some slid, others kissed the cracked concrete beneath their feet. They were still crying, still laughing, still alive. Emily didn't exit with the first wave. She remained behind, checking the unconscious co-pilot, guiding flight crew, securing controls. When she finally stepped out of the cockpit and into the cabin, the reaction was instant. A woman with 2 children clutched them tighter and whispered, "Thank you." An elderly man stood, swaying, and tried to salute. A teenager stared at her like she'd walked out of a movie. She said nothing, just nodded and walked the aisle slowly, helping where she could, guiding an elderly woman to her feet, lifting a fallen carry-on from the aisle, holding a crying girl's hand as they reached the exit. Then she stepped out. Her shoes met the cold, wet pavement of Mackenzie Ridge. A spontaneous cheer erupted, raw, unrehearsed, unstoppable. Rescue crews, passengers, even bystanders clapped, shouted. Some cried openly. For a moment, Emily stood in the middle of it all, frozen. Someone rushed forward with a blanket. A paramedic tried to check her vitals. Another asked if she was injured. "I'm fine," she murmured. "Check the co-pilot. He needs help first." They nodded and ran past her. She stood there on the very strip she'd just landed a crippled aircraft onto, surrounded by fog, emergency lights, and the breath of survival. Helicopters thumped overhead. News vans rumbled up the ridge road. Reporters shouted through microphones. Someone called her name. "Ma'am, were you really just a passenger? How did you do it?" Emily turned away from the chaos. No interviews. Not today. She found the back bumper of a fire truck and sat down quietly, her legs finally giving out beneath her. Someone handed her a bottle of water. Her hands trembled as she unscrewed the cap. She took a slow sip, looked at the sky, the same sky she'd once sworn off, the same sky she'd just conquered. She had done something no one expected. Not her colleagues, not her instructors, not even herself. And in that still moment, soaked in rain and lit by rescue lights, a quiet truth whispered to her. She hadn't landed that plane in spite of who she was. She landed it because she never stopped being her even when the world did. By morning, Emily Carter's name was everywhere. News anchors replayed shaky passenger footage, headlines blinked across every screen. Civilian lands crippled jet. Passenger turns pilot and sky emergency. Her photo snapped seconds after she stepped onto Mackenzie Ridge circulated the globe. In it, she looked dazed, drenched, still clutching a water bottle. Alive, real, unassuming. A face the world hadn't seen coming. But Emily didn't answer calls. She didn't check the news. Instead, she spent the night in a bunk inside a rural fire station near the landing strip. No media, no statements, just silence, just breath. The quiet after the unthinkable. Her phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, airlines, government officials. Even a Hollywood agent offering life rights. She ignored them all. Until just before dawn, a knock came at the door. Captain Doyle stood there now in a fresh uniform, eyes still hollow from the night before. They want us in Eugene, he said gently. FAA, the airline, the governor, press conference. Emily looked away. I didn't do it for applause. I know. That's why you have to go. She didn't answer right away, but in her chest, she knew she owed those passengers something, even if the story didn't belong to her alone, so she agreed. A black SUV picked them up mid-morning, police escort, flashing lights. A media frenzy trailed in their wake. Cameras hovered as they arrived. Security parted crowds. The conference room inside the Eugene Convention Center was packed, journalists shoulder to shoulder, microphones tangled in clusters. Emily stood behind the podium, Captain Doyle beside her. He spoke first. His words came slow, heartfelt, cracked around the edges. I've flown for over 30 years. I've handled turbulence, malfunctions, emergencies. But yesterday, we were beyond procedure. I lost my co-pilot. My systems failed. I was out of time. And then, a passenger, Millie Carter, stood up. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for permission. She just did what had to be done. He turned toward her. Then it was her turn. Emily stepped forward, fingers brushing the podium edge. For a moment, the cameras vanished. The room shrank. She looked out at the lights, the anticipation, and then she spoke. I was a passenger, she began. Her voice was soft but sure. But I'm also a trained pilot. Years ago, I walked away from aviation, not because I didn't love flying, but because I was told I didn't belong, that I wasn't calm enough, that I wasn't the kind of person you want in a crisis. A hush fell over the room. She continued. Well, this was a crisis. No one moved. No one blinked. I didn't save that plane alone. The captain gave me space. The flight crew stayed composed. Firefighters lit the runway. But yes, I flew the plane. I landed it, and I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it needed to be done. Because people were depending on someone to act. There was a beat of silence, then applause. Not polite, not staged, real, powerful. Some stood, some wept. When she stepped down, FAA officials shook her hand. One director whispered, "You've just changed what courage looks like in this country." The offers poured in. Airlines offering captain slots, military officers urging her return, publishers dangling book deals. Talk show hosts called her the face of instinct. Agents pushed movie rights. She declined them all, but one letter caught her eye. A handwritten note, postmarked from Kansas. 12 years old, a girl named Lily, she wrote, "My brother says girls can't fly planes, but I saw you do it, and now I want to fly." Emily read that line again and again. That it was the moment she realized this wasn't about headlines. It was about showing someone, maybe just one person, that the sky wasn't closed to them. Asterisk. The world wanted Emily Carter to become a symbol. Media outlets flooded her inbox with interview requests. Publishers promised six-figure advances. A-list producers pitched movie adaptations. Her agent, who she never had before but apparently did, now compiled a spreadsheet of speaking tours offers. Everyone wanted her story, but she didn't want a spotlight. What caught her attention wasn't the glitz, it was a single sentence, scribbled in a girl's handwriting. "I saw you do it, and now I want to fly." That letter became her compass. Emily contacted the airline directly. She didn't ask for compensation. She didn't ask for a stage. She asked for action. "I don't want a book deal," she told the CEO on a quiet call. "I want a scholarship fund for girls, for kids who've been told no. Let's train the next generation of pilots that don't look the part." There was a pause on the line, then a response, "Done." And so, quietly, without cameras or headlines, the Emily Carter Flight Academy Fund was born. Its mission, to sponsor flight training for young women, minorities, and anyone who had been underestimated. She didn't want a monument. She wanted a runway. In her first public appearance since the landing, Emily visited a modest flight school outside Seattle. No press, no formal attire. Just her, a weathered bomber jacket, and a group of young cadets who looked at her like she was a comet. She spoke to them from the heart. "No one hands you confidence," she said, standing beside a Cessna 172. "You build it in silence, in failure, and in the choices no one sees." I walked away from flying because someone told me I wasn't built for pressure. Turns out, pressure doesn't break us, it introduces us to who we really are. One student raised her hand. "Weren't you scared?" Emily smiled softly, terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's taking the controls anyway. The students hung on every word. From that moment forward, Emily wasn't just a miracle pilot, she was a mentor. The weeks that followed saw a quiet ripple. Flight schools across the country reported spikes in female applicants. Aviation forums buzzed. With new voices, scholarships started flowing, and everywhere, airports, online, in letters, strangers reached out to thank her, but she never opened a social media account. She didn't post about her work. She just kept showing up at training centers, in classrooms, beside flight simulators, not just flight mechanics, but mindset, instinct, and decision-making in chaos. And through it all, she carried that letter in her flight bag, the one from Lily in Kansas, a reminder that a single landing could change more than just the lives. On one plane, it could change the trajectory of countless others. The weather turned crisp in Seattle. Leaves drifted across the academy tarmac. The hangar echoed with propeller tests and excited student chatter. Emily Carter found rhythm in her days teaching throttle curves, reading wind shear, correcting yoke tension with a firm but patient hand. She was back in the sky, just not at 30,000 feet. She thought that chapter was behind her until the black SUV pulled into the gravel lot. One afternoon, Emily watched it from the control tower window. It didn't belong. Polished, government plates. Out stepped a tall man in a deep blue uniform, sharp-pressed silver insignia catching the autumn sun. He didn't head toward the main office. He walked straight for her. Emily met him halfway down the tarmac. "Miss Carter," he said, voice steady. She narrowed her eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Shaw," she replied before he could introduce himself. He raised his brows. "So you do remember me?" "I remember you ran final evaluations at Maxwell Base, and I remember you," he said. "Best hands I ever saw in a simulator. And yet, you walked away." Emily folded her arms. "I was told I didn't fit the mold." He nodded slowly. "You were told wrong. Some of us knew it then, but the system didn't know how to value what it couldn't quantify." She stared at him. Quiet. "So why are you here?" Shaw reached into his coat and produced a slim black folder. Inside, a formal letter, a recommendation package, an invitation to return. "We want you back. Full certification, tactical and emergency response instruction, civilian or military. Track, your choice. No gatekeeping this time, just a cockpit students who need to learn what you clearly never forgot." Emily held the folder like it might burn her. "This because of the landing?" she asked. "This is because the world saw what you were under pressure," he replied. "When chaos hit, you didn't freeze. You calculated, acted, saved 181 people. That's not protocol, that's instinct. And we need that kind of leadership again." Emily glanced at the horizon. She hadn't touched an Air Force uniform in years, hadn't walked on military-grade tarmac, hadn't even worn her old dog tags. But something in her stirred a pilot's heartbeat, dormant but never truly gone. "I'm not interested in being a mascot," she said finally. "You're already a symbol," Shaw replied. "But what you do with that, that's still yours to decide." He left her with a folder, a quiet nod, and the echo of his boots on concrete. That night, Emily sat on the porch outside her small instructor's office, the stars overhead as clear as they'd ever been. She opened the folder again. Reread. Every word. It didn't demand. It invited. She remembered being 16, standing behind a chain-link fence, watching jets take off, the roar of power carving through her chest like thunder. She didn't want to prove herself back then. She just wanted to rise. Now, she had landed a crippled aircraft on a forgotten strip of Earth, and the world wanted her back in the sky. But this time, it would be on her terms. Emily Carter didn't rush her answer. She carried the offer in her satchel for 3 full days. Through hangar walkthroughs, through classroom briefings, through simulator drills with cadets learning to breathe through emergencies. Her students never asked what the black folder was, but they noticed the change in her eyes, focused, far off, like she was flying somewhere only she could see. When she finally called Colonel Shaw back, her voice was clear. "I'm not returning full-time." A pause. "Understood. But," she continued, "I will teach. Not in lectures, not behind a desk. I want to train in the air. Real planes, real emergencies. You want pilots ready for chaos. Let me show them what it means to stay level when everything's falling apart." Shaw's tone softened. "That's the best outcome I could have hoped for." And just like that, Emily Carter became a special instructor for the U.S. Air Force's Advanced Response Simulation Division civilian status. But frontline access, her role wasn't about formations or medals. It was about mindset. She built a program around controlled failure engine stalls, pressure drops, mechanical misfires. Inside flight simulators, she'd kill power mid-climb and watch students freeze. She didn't yell, she waited. then coached them to reset their brains, read instruments, trust instincts. Pilots don't panic, she told them. They processed her lessons, rippled outward. Aviation schools began modeling curriculum on her approach. Airline training, departments requested guest sessions. The Carter Flight Fund grew, now supporting dozens of students across 5 states. She refused interviews but made time for every handwritten letter, especially the ones from girls. She visited hangars at midnight to help cadets who needed extra hours. She ate lunch on wing flaps beside teens who thought they weren't smart enough for skywork. She showed them how to breathe when the alarm lights flash red. Months passed, the world moved on, but, for those she taught, Emily became something more than a miracle headline. She became a compass. One night, after a long day of drills, her assistant popped into the hangar. "There's someone here. To see you," she said. Emily turned, exhausted. "I'm not doing visitors tonight," he says. "He was on your flight." That stopped her. In the lobby stood a teenage boy, 15, maybe hoodie soaked from rain. Duffel bag slouched beside his sneakers. He looked up shyly. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "Seat 23C. I saw you walk to the cockpit." Emily stared at him. Slowly, she nodded. "I remember." He pulled a notebook from his baggage's cold, cover frayed. Inside were pages of hand-sketched cockpits, throttle diagrams, emergency checklists. "I've been studying, saving money, watching training videos online. I want to fly. I want to be like you." Emily blinked, her throat tightening. He opened to a page labeled Dreams. Handwritten at the top, "Emily Carter saved my life. I want to learn to do the same." She turned the page, heart stuttering. "You have the right instincts," she said softly. "You just need the right tools." He gave a sheepish smile. "Tools cost money. Have you heard of the Carter Flight Fund?" His eyes widened. "That's yours." She nodded. "You're already accepted." He froze, lips trembling. "Are you serious? You showed up," she said. "That takes more courage than most people realize." He tried to speak, then didn't. Instead, he hugged her, tight, shaky, wordless. She stood still at first. Then, slowly, she returned. "The embrace. You're going to fly, Jacob, but more than that, you're going to lead." Jacob's application was the first Emily ever approved personally, but it wasn't the last. Over the next year, the Carter Flight Fund became more than a scholarship, it became a movement. Flight academies from New Mexico to Maine began receiving surprise envelopes, tuition paid in full, books covered, simulator hours funded, all for students who had been told no one too many times. They called it the Passenger Project. The name stuck. It wasn't just about becoming pilots, it was about rewriting stories. Jacob graduated top of his class within 2 years. His instructors called him Quiet Lightning, focused, respectful, deadly, precise. When he earned his first solo flight clearance, he mailed Emily a photo, him beside a single-engine Cessna, grinning like he'd just touched the edge of space. The caption read, "Seat 23C cleared for takeoff." Emily hung it in her office. One wall of the hangar eventually became a living mural. Dozens of flight school portraits, student selfies, photos of first flights, all stamped with handwritten notes. "Thank you for believing in me," or "I never thought I'd touch the sky." She never asked for thanks, but each one meant something. They meant she hadn't just survived a landing. She'd ignited liftoff for hundreds of others. She returned to the cockpit occasionally, this time in instructor jumpsuit. She flew crosswinds with cadets, sweating through their gloves. She taught landings in low visibility. She simulated panic and helped them see through it. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal engine-out drill, she gathered a group of first-year trainees and asked a single question. "When it all goes wrong, what do you trust first?" A few mumbled checklists. One said, "My co-pilot." Another guessed the instruments. Emily shook her head. "Yourself," she said, "because no one writes a manual for what we faced that day. There's no checklist for losing half a plane midair and still choosing to believe there's a way down. There's only what you carry up here." She tapped her temple. "And in here," she tapped her chest. They didn't forget it. The academy grew. Young women from farming towns, immigrants who had never seen a cockpit, veterans returning to civilian life. They all walked through the same sliding doors under the faded steel sign, Emily Carter Flight Academy. Not everyone's born for the sky, but anyone can rise. Some reporters still reached out. Some offered to option the rights again. A famous director even sent a handwritten letter, out of bitterness. But because this quiet transformation was enough, the news cycle had moved on. But she hadn't. She didn't want red carpets, that she wanted clear runways. Then one day, as she closed the hangar after a long training day, her phone buzzed. It was Captain Doyle. Flight 982 reunion. Next month, Mackenzie Ridge. You have a seat of honor. She stared at the message, then typed back, I'll be there. But make sure they know IE was never alone up there. Asterisk. The afternoon sun slanted low over Mackenzie Ridge. The once forgotten military strip now hummed with life. New tarmac poured. Runway lights installed, a modest control tower gleaming like a scar turned silver. It no longer looked like a place planes came to die. It looked like a place where they were born again. Emily Carter stood by the edge of the field, her jacket collar flipped against the breeze. The Flight 982 reunion had drawn nearly every survivor. Some had aged, some brought children, others still wore wristbands from the hospital stays that followed. But all of them had come back for her. She didn't wear a uniform, she didn't need one. They knew her. They remembered. A small ceremony unfolded beside the hangar. A plaque was unveiled, in honor of Emily Carter, passenger, pilot, protector. Captain Doyle gave a brief speech, his voice thick with pride. She didn't just save lives, she changed them. Then he turned to her, ready to say a few words. Emily hesitated, then stepped forward. She looked at the crowd, not just the survivors, but cadets, reporters, engineers, flight crews, young women clutching notebooks with her name in the margins. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I didn't land that plane because I wanted to be remembered, she began. I landed it because no one else could, and because people were counting on someone to stop being afraid and start acting. She paused. I was scared, but I wasn't alone. The captain gave me space. The crew held the line. The fire teams lit the ground beneath us. We all landed that plane together. That's the truth. There was silence, then applause deep, full of gratitude. Later, as dusk painted the sky in golden shadow, Emily wandered toward the runway's edge. She stood where her hands had last steadied a crashing machine, where tires had kissed concrete like it was holy ground, where the impossible had met instinct and surrendered. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Tower says the last departure's clear. You want to see something? It was Jacob, now 17, tall, calm, dressed in instructor blue. She followed him to the hangar. A small two-seater aircraft waited, polished and prepped. He handed her a headset. Don't worry, he smiled. You're not flying today. I am. She laughed quietly. Then let's go. They climbed in, taxied to the runway, and with a smooth pull, Jacob lifted them into the darkening sky. Emily leaned back in the seat as the lights of Mackenzie Ridge shrank below them. The stars stretched out like pinholes in velvet. Wind whispered past the wings. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The sky said it for her. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a pilot of futures, of legacies, of second chances, and now finally of peace.